I break up room, no seed biting, never bites. Fast water dribbling in the girls down with the guys. Spin now, see, black, you right, fine. OMG, Mac 4, Robert C, Gallon, Neck Night. Hot stove, talk, Robert C, bringing the hype. EC's alive, plus trust under those in my city lights. White. Queens got the dreams united. On the rag, trump out, bring me stack. Night and under that chocolate flag. Smack that home out the park. Fuck it, deafening black. Side game time, Robin CP time to ignite. Under NYC skies, we fight the good fight. Remains cheer in the orange, we unite. Match forever. I'm fit to be in sight. Match riding high. Energy like a live wire. Queen City chance. Passion never tires. Grand slam dreams and paces over fast. Holding it steady, cause we know we gonna last. We the kings of the field, time to ignite. Under NYC skies, we fight the good fight. Remain cheer in the orange, we unite. Match forever. Our victory in sight. All hearts ignite like NYC stars. Robin CP, guiding even through scars. Queens got the glow, city anthem flows.
What's up, Mets fans? Welcome back to another Mets Hot Stove right here on the channel and on X, episode 23 of Mets Hot Stove. And we are in the new year, starting to get a couple of more moves coming about. As before I went live, Michael Lorenzen signed with the Royals. There was a trade as Gavin Lux got traded from the Dodgers to the Cincinnati Reds. And there was a report that just came out that Luis Arraez was potentially going to the Yankees, but apparently it's not a good fit, which means that the Padres are not falling for the Yankees scum of prospects, that they continue to act like they have the best prospects in baseball when they don't really have the best prospects in baseball. So with that said, welcome to the Hot Stove, guys. Hopefully everybody's enjoying their Monday, January 6th, 2025. We're a little more than a month away until pitchers and catchers report. And obviously the Mets have a lot to do still when it comes to their roster. Are they going to get a bat or two? They clearly need another starting pitching. They need some bullpen help, and that's what we're going to talk about today in regards to the Mets roster going into the season. And also, there was something else that popped up on my newsfeed about 5 minutes ago, is that the Padres are facing ownership disputes between family members, and that's never good. That is never good. And that just shows that the Padres are probably selling a couple of guys at this point. I wouldn't be shocked if they trade a couple of guys. We've talked a little bit about Dylan Cease a couple of hot stoves ago in regards to can the Mets go after him over Luis Castillo. It can be more of a possibility knowing that the Padres are going through this owner dispute at the moment. And it's talked about widow of former owner Peter Seidler is suing his brothers for control of the franchise. So they're suing each other. Families hate each other, and somebody wants to own the team. So there's a lot going on right now. And, I got you covered tonight, and we'll spend this hour on the Mets Hot Stove trying to figure out what is David Stearns going to do. And at least there were some moves today, right? The week is basically the second week in January is where hopefully things are starting to pick up a little bit. Obviously, at the end of this week, we're going to really get to know more and more about where Sasaki is potentially going, and we'll get into that as well. But topic number one, guys, is Alonso return slim at this point. And you know what? It's starting to feel like that a little bit, right? I still don't believe he's going to get a long-term deal from anybody. I feel like if there's a team that matches the New York Mets, is Pete Alonso choosing the Mets over that other team? That is something yet to be determined, and that is something that I want to actually get into when it comes to Pete Alonso, because we know he turned down 7 for 158 last season. He turned down 3 for 90. It doesn't seem, and Jeff Passan reported today that he doesn't see any team giving him a long-term deal. It's going to be a short-term deal with opt-outs. So if the Angels, let's say, give him a short-term deal with opt-outs similar to the Mets, will he go to the Angels other than the Mets? And if I'm the Mets, I don't give him 6 years. I don't give him 5 years. There's no reason to give him that when nobody else is offering him that. And I think the furthest the Mets will go is the 4 years for 120, if that. And I don't think the Angels, unless they get desperate, which I don't see them doing, but Arte Moreno is a very interesting owner, and he likes to spend money, and he doesn't spend it as wisely in years past, and I don't think he's going to do it again here. I'd be shocked if the New York Mets up their offer when they really don't have to. Like, is this a Boris ploy? Are the Angels actually interested in Pete Alonso? I mean, sure. But is this a Boris situation where we all heard right before the Nationals got a first baseman off the market, it was Boris trying to get the Nationals involved with Pete Alonso, and that team came off the board. So I don't know if the Angels are more of a Boris ploy, a John Heyman ploy to get the Mets to up their offer a little bit. But hey, at the end of the day, the New York Mets don't have to overextend. They don't have to offer more than they currently have. There's no need to, right? It's either take our offer or find something better. And I still believe the Mets are going to get the final call if the Angels, say if they do go for 4 for 120 or even 5 for 160 or 155 or whatever it is, something around that range, the Mets are going to get the final call. We do know the Mets are going to get the final call prior to Alonso going elsewhere. So if the Mets don't match it or at least do a little bit better, Alonso's gone. And I know that's going to piss a lot of people off, but again, there's been talks for months, and there's a reason why. And I keep on going back to this, right? There's Met fans that is like, oh, I can't believe they might not sign Alonso, blah, blah, blah. I know there's people in the chat that might think the same thing. But around baseball, people are not valuing Pete Alonso. And that's a fact. This has nothing to do with the Mets. Take the Mets out of the picture for a second. There is no team that values Pete Alonso for 5+ years. They just don't. For whatever reason, if it's the way they don't think he's going to age well, whatever. I don't believe in that nonsense. I think that's crazy, but teams do. If it's the way he plays as a hitter, as he's kind of been, going downhill a tad, a little bit when it comes to average, more strikeouts, less walks. He's been, early in his career, he was a better overall hitter, and now he's just a power hitter. And I think he can get back up to that 250, 260. But again, there's too many teams that needed the first baseman this offseason, and Pete Alonso was easily available. You could say he was the best one on the market in the free agent pool for first baseman. So why is it that teams around the league, and you can't say all of them are stupid or all of them don't know what they're doing, because that's not true. There was a couple of teams that have been doing very well, have been successful, that needed the first baseman, that have made a lot of right moves. And they weren't even that interested, if at all, with Pete Alonso. So it's very interesting to see the dynamic of the offseason for Pete Alonso. Now, if Pete Alonso had a great season, would that have changed some minds? Maybe. But remember, Pete Alonso was worth more to the Mets than any other team. And we all know there was more Mets fans than ever before prior to him hitting that home run in Milwaukee that were done with Pete Alonso. And that's a fact. And it still took basically the entire year for people to realize the issue that Pete Alonso has been having offensively. And it's frustrating because I don't want to be negative towards our players, but stats are stats and facts are facts. Pete Alonso has been terrible with runners in scoring position. He is not very good with run production other than hitting home runs. If he doesn't hit home runs, he doesn't drive in the runs. That is something that was easily come by earlier in his career. He would get those RBIs other than hitting home runs. That's why he was hitting 130, 140 RBIs. But when you hit 35, or even if you hit 40 and you have 103 RBIs, the majority of those home runs were because RBIs were because of those home runs. And you could say, well, that should be good. But yeah, if you really break down the numbers, and Chris and me talk about this a lot, Chris did a breakdown of all the numbers last season and through his career. A lot of his home runs are in not so interesting or very clutch spots. They are in a lot of, dead games where games are over, where there's there's a discrepancy in the game where one team's ahead by a lot. It's basically blowout games. And he has a lot of those. And that's the interesting thing that people started to bring up later in the year, where the national news started to bring it up, the national sports writers started to bring it up, and it started to become a talking point because for whatever reason, the New York sports reporters were afraid to bring it up. They were afraid to question it. And when the national reporters, which I don't think are very good, but when they actually spitted some facts for once, they actually showed the issue. And the thing is, I don't think Pete Alonso will be more valuable for another team. He will be valuable for the New York Mets. Now, not for 6 or 7 years, not even for 5 years, in my opinion. I don't think the Mets are going to go past 4 years. And yes, there is other options for the New York Mets where they can go. They can easily pivot and go after Bregman and sign Bregman. They can trade for Vlad Guerrero Jr. And, again, I brought this up on my video. If you haven't watched my video that I posted yesterday, in regards to Vlad Guerrero, I also put a trade proposal out there that I think is very fair for the Toronto Blue Jays to take. Vladimir Guerrero overall is a better player. And I know people are talking about the problem is people look at Pete Alonso's power and saying he's a better player. But if you look at it overall, Vladimir Guerrero is the better player. On top of that, he is 5 years younger. And that is something that is very beneficial and very eye-opening for a team that is looking 5 years from now, 3 years from now, 4 years from now. And I think the fact that the Mets are giving short-term deal offers to Pete Alonso is telling you that they don't believe that. I don't think they think that he's as good as a player as a lot of people, or at least Met fans, portrayed him to be. And it's embarrassing when Met fans say, oh, but he can break some records and break some Mets records, home run records. Yeah, the Mets records aren't that good. Like, could we calm down with that? So I don't understand the fact that now the easier way for the Mets to go is to just sign Pete Alonso. I think that's probably the best route of going and getting that extra bat that you can add to the Juan Soto's, Lindor's, Vientos, and Nimmo's of the world. It's fine. It is absolutely fine. But you have to remember, this is not me or you. This is what baseball thinks of Pete Alonso. And again, you have to question why other teams, most teams, if not all teams, are shying away from a long-term deal from Pete Alonso. Because again, Pete Alonso didn't have a terrible year if you just look at his normal stats, right? 37 home runs, not bad, right? I think he had just under 90 RBIs, if I'm not mistaken, right? The average wasn't there, but okay. All of the other stats, you're looking like, oh, well, OPS was fine, what people look at. But again, there's a lot more there that people are looking at, and I just don't understand. Well, I do understand, but there's not enough people to understand why teams are actually shying away from Pete Alonso. There's many factors. And that should open up some eyes. That should tell you a lot more than what the hell I'm telling you, or anybody else, or any other fan. The teams are telling you around baseball that they don't believe in Pete Alonso long-term. Now, maybe a short-term deal on a 3-year deal, but again, it goes back to the question. If Pete Alonso was offered a deal from the Los Angeles Angels that are similar to the Mets offer of 3 years for 90, which I still don't believe the Angels, are going to go $30 million a year. I just don't see it. But let's say if they do, what if there's a similar offer on the table and it's still 3 years? And what does that mean? Does Pete Alonso take that offer from the Angels? Because that's even a more tough sign that I don't think Pete Alonso really actually wants to be a New York Met. Right? I truly believe that. And Ken, yeah, I understand the AL is weak, but it's not the same anymore in baseball. You play National League more often than you do than ever. So the season stats are more warranted, and you should look at them more during the season because you played the National League a lot more. And the American League plays the National League, and the National League plays the American League. I mean, the Mets are opening up in Houston this year. And then they play their home opener against the Toronto Blue Jays. So they're playing 2 American League teams within the first week and a half of the season. So the season numbers have nothing to do with a bad American League. Now, if you want to go directly to the division itself, because you play them each 13 times, sure. But you know what? The Yankees were a pretty damn good team. The Orioles were a good team. And after that, well, I mean, you could say the Red Sox were okay, but that's about it. But again, you play the National League and the American League so often now. Interleague plays basically every day. So you play these guys, these teams a lot more. And I understand that. But you know what? That shouldn't stop you from saying, oh, well, he's not a good player. Vladimir Guerrero is a very good player. Right? Again, you can have an argument of if Pete Alonso and Vladimir Guerrero are better. Again, you don't see Vladimir Guerrero play every day, just like I don't see Vladimir Guerrero play every day. Right? All we can go by is stats. Right? This is same reason why people are a little off on Juan Soto sometimes. People are like, oh, why do you want Juan Soto? Well, when you watched him every day, you see what he does. It's not just his at-bats. You see what he does throughout the game. You see what he does to the team in general. That is the thing and again, Vladimir Guerrero has not been successful with the Toronto Blue Jays. But you know what? There's a lot of players that are very good that are on bad teams. Doesn't mean they're not going to be successful. His stats are very, very similar when it comes to year by year. And I understand why people were like, well, look what Pete Alonso has done. Yeah, but Pete Alonso has been tailing off. If you look at his overall numbers year by year, they've been getting progressively worse. Not saying that he can't hit 44 home runs next year and bat 260. I still believe he can, but he has to change his approach. Now, again, I don't know why Pete Alonso changed his approach. He used to be a damn good hitter. He used to be a 260 hitter, take that ball the other way, didn't always look for home runs like he is now. His strikeouts are up 40%. His walks are down. His OPS is down career-wise. And his average is down. That's too many stats. And then on top of that, the run production that he is very bad in, his clutch numbers are extremely bad. And then you wonder why people question Pete Alonso. Well, there's your reason. And the reason why people now, I know Ken don't think that Vladimir Guerrero is better than Pete Alonso because you're more focused on just the power numbers. And that's the issue. Consistently, Vladimir Guerrero's average, his career average is 288, right? He's averaging around 30 to 34 home runs per year, right? He's averaging 94 RBIs a season. And yes, it's not overall better than Pete Alonso, but he's hitting 10 to 12 less home runs than Pete Alonso, but still having similar RBIs, if not more. Why is that? Because he's not just a power hitter. He batted 323 last year? The fact is, Pete Alonso, for the last couple of seasons, has not done anything outside the home run to drive runs in. That has been a huge problem, especially in the Mets' middle of the lineup, right? You can't have Juan Soto bat in front of you. You can't have Lindor in front of you, get on base, and you don't do nothing. And then you have to start worrying about the bottom of the order trying to produce. That's the issue. That is the biggest issue when it comes to Pete. And it's continuing to be a problem. And, there's too many garbage time home runs. And John brought it up, he hits a lot of solo home runs, right? He doesn't hit enough when it matters the most. And Chris, I'm not going to say Vladdy's a much better fielder than Pete. I'm not going to give that benefit. Again, I don't see I can go by just stats, right? And analytical stats defensively, right? I see Pete Alonso play for 6 years now. And he gotten better over the years, right? I don't watch Vladimir Guerrero every day, so I can't tell you. I think defense is more of watching the guy every day. I don't really care about the analytical stats. I like to look at a guy every single day. I don't watch Vladimir Guerrero every day. So I don't know. Now, if you're saying Vladdy is number one in MLB scoops, that's fine. Pete Alonso's right up there as well, right? So I'm not going to do that at all because it's not fair to Pete Alonso, and I'm not going to give credit to a guy that I don't watch enough, right? Because I don't watch Toronto Blue Jay baseball for 162 games like I do the Mets, right? To me, if you watch a guy every day, you get a better understanding of his defense, right? Everybody knew that Lindor was good, but how many Met fans couldn't stand him? Yet you see how important his defense is. And that goes for Pete Alonso as well, right? I've seen Pete Alonso progress and become a better first baseman. So he worked his ass off. He wasn't very good. His footwork was terrible in the beginning, right? He wasn't good at scooping balls, but he got better at it. And I'll be the first one to say that. And we all know that I'm not the biggest fan of Pete Alonso, but I'm going to give credit where credit's due. Pete Alonso has worked on his game defensively and has gotten better. Now, do I think he's very good? No. At first base, no. His footwork is still a little spotty. He can't throw the ball to any base. So, yeah, that's an issue. But to say that he can be a better first baseman than Vlad, I'm not going to say yes or no because I don't watch Vlad every single day, right? Again, if there's any Blue Jay fans there that work every day, great. You see him every day. Maybe you have a better understanding of Vlad than I do defensively, right? I looked at the metrics defensively for Vlad. It is better than Pete Alonso, but I'm not going to judge it on that. I'm just not, right? Because I just don't see him every day. Well, Pete Alonso has never hit that slider, right? What he used to do is lay off of that slider. That's the biggest issue, right? That is the biggest issue with Pete Alonso that I have become very frustrated about because of the fact that Pete Alonso used to take that slider, right? He never used to go after that slider. He used to spit on it more often than not. For whatever reason, I don't know if he's got more power conscious, home run conscious, or what, but he's become basically a power hitter, and that's it. And his production comes from the home run ball. And again, it's not a lot. That is the issue, right? When only 20% of your RBIs have come in big spots, that means the other 80% of his RBIs are basically and that's a fact, right? You bring even Brandon Nimmo, 45% of his RBIs come in big spots. Lindor was over 60 last year. Vientos was near 65. So it's just a matter of, look, you can't go wrong with either one of these guys at first base. Like, I think we can all agree, Pete Alonso or Vladimir Guerrero, you can do a hell of a lot worse. But the good news is the Mets can have either, right? I do believe that the Blue Jays are going to offer Vladimir Guerrero another offer. He's going to decline it because why would he take it? I don't think he wants to be there. And again, the Blue Jays continue to lose out on free agents. Vladimir Guerrero knows he's going to be the last one standing, and he's going to be gone anyway. So, and the Blue Jays are not going to get nothing for him. I find that very hard to believe, right? Anthony Santander looks like he could be heading to the Blue Jays, but is that enough to keep Vladimir Guerrero around? I don't know. I don't know. So it's going to be it's an interesting dynamic of why Vladimir Guerrero, and there's a reason why, right? The Mets can't wait forever for Alonso. You can't keep on playing this waiting game and more guys go off the board. If Bregman goes, Santander goes, now what do you do? Right? Maybe that's what Pete Alonso and Scott Boras is waiting for, where the Mets have nowhere else to go. But I'm going to tell you this right now. The Mets aren't going to wait much longer, because sooner or later, they're going to have to make a decision. All right, Pete, you either want to be here or not. If not, we're going to have to pivot. And I think the Mets will. I think as soon as Sasaki signs, now you got a week until that happens, maybe a little more. So I don't think Pete Alonso is going to sign before that. Is Bregman or Santander coming off the board? Well, if that's the case, then the Mets might have to start pivoting a little quicker than they might want to, right? I want the Mets to make a decision here. Like, I honestly do, right? At this point, make your freaking decision, right? If it's Pete Alonso, great. I'm fine, cool, whatever. If it's Bregman, fine. Do what you need to do. But make a decision, because waiting is only going to hurt you, in my opinion. And that's why with Alonso right now, playing this whatever game he's trying to play with Scott Boras is, one, hurting him, and two, it's not making the Mets, any better at this point. It's getting to the point where it's getting annoying, and I just want to get this ready to go. Oh, absolutely, Domenico. If we can get Sasaki, man, it changes the offseason. It does change the offseason, right? If you get Sasaki, you get another starter in here. I feel a little bit much better than with the rotation than I did probably prior to getting Sasaki, if we do. And if you get Sasaki now, but again, you can't keep on waiting around for Pete Alonso to figure out what he wants to do. Like, you're going to be waiting for a long-term deal. You're not going to get one. Sorry. The Angels are probably not going to offer you a 6-year deal. If you do, you're probably gone. And then the Mets definitely got to pivot. So, unfortunately, I'm thinking more and more Pete Alonso is going to take another offer, even if it's similar to the New York Mets. I think he will be gone. Because if there's similar money, similar years with similar opt-outs, he's gone. And that might piss a lot of people off, but business is business. What are you going to do? All right. So the Vladimir Guerrero Bregman duo situation, right? It's far-fetched. I understand that. But it could be talked about if Pete Alonso goes elsewhere and Pete Alonso continues to wait this out, because I don't think the Mets are going to wait much longer. I truly don't believe that. I think that I would be shocked if they don't make a signing prior to Sasaki making his decision. And I just feel like the Mets are – I know what was it? Jeff Passan said that the Mets are in on starting pitching, outfield, and obviously bench, bullpen, obviously. So that's fine. But there's been a lot of weirdness when it comes to Alex Bregman, that the Detroit Tigers are all in, but they don't want to pay what he's looking for. The Red Sox seem to be in on Bregman, but I still don't think they're going to do it. I don't think they're going to move Devers. I know they said they want to. I don't see them spending 6-7 years on Bregman just to move Devers out of third base. I just don't see that. I really don't see that. And I think it's frustrating that we have to wait, because David Stearns is very methodical here, and it is very frustrating. But I still think Bregman is going to be a Met. Like, I find that crazy to say that. Like, I laughed at the situation earlier in the offseason, but it just feels like it's going to happen. Like, there's a possibility that that the Red Sox might pivot elsewhere, and I don't think Detroit is as serious with Bregman, because I don't think they want to pay the price tag and the years. So I think Bregman might just fall into the Mets' lap here. And if you get Bregman, that makes the whole dynamic with Pete Alonso very interesting, because they can pivot at this point. Vientos can move to first base. Bregman could be a third baseman. Or the Mets can still go after Vladimir Guerrero Jr. if they really wanted to. And I know people keep on saying in the chat that the Blue Jays are not going to trade Vladimir Guerrero Jr. If they don't come to a contract offer, there is no more negotiations prior to spring training or after when spring training starts. Vladimir Guerrero made that perfectly clear. Vlad also made it perfectly clear what he wants, and it's $400+ million. So if the Blue Jays aren't willing to go that far and spring training comes, guess what? They're not going to lose it for nothing. And you guys are right. They might trade him at the deadline. Well, and that's the thing. And Arlene, I love your little graphic there with a grimace and Met hat. That's pretty cool. Arlene, well, we have to remember, I think people forget because we saw Vientos play third base this year, that prior to Brett Beatty losing his job, Vientos was the DH and first baseman nearly all the time in the minors. So he's played enough first base where he can play first base, right? There's no reason why he can't be a decent first baseman, right? But you move Vientos for Alex Bregman. You do that because you get a better defender and you're still going to keep Vientos bat in the lineup. You're just moving him to first base. Not the end of the world. And there is a possibility that Vladimir Guerrero could be traded at the deadline. And the reason why, if you haven't seen my proposal for Vladimir Guerrero Jr., that's why the Mets need to be aggressive this offseason if they do get Alex Bregman and they pivot from Alonso. Because if you're a little bit aggressive with your proposal, you might entice the Blue Jays to trade Vladimir Guerrero Jr. this offseason. That's why if you look at my proposal and check the video out, and I'll go into detail about why and people think it might be an overpay, but it's a very fair deal for the Blue Jays because they get what they need along with a little bit more, and you entice the Blue Jays to make that trade and trade Vlad instead of waiting until the deadline. And that's the important thing here. And that's especially if the Blue Jays don't get Anthony Santander. If they don't get any of these free agents, what incentive do they have to keep Vladimir Guerrero Jr.? They have none. So that is where you got to pay attention here to the situation that's going on with the Blue Jays right now, because I think that's a big reason why the Mets are still going very slowly, even though Pete Alonso was offered a deal from the Mets, right? They could have got him back. He didn't want it. What are you supposed to do? Give him 6 years? No, you just don't do that. Yeah, Michael, I understand Vlad's a free agent after this season, but look, this is a very similar situation than with the Francisco Lindor situation. The Mets traded basically all their shortstops in Jimenez and Rosario for Francisco Lindor, knowing that he's a potential free agent at the end of the year. But they still made that trade. You know why? Because you got Steve Cohen. He was not going to let Lindor go to free agency. That's why he overpaid for Francisco Lindor, and everybody thought it was a big overpay. Sure, it was. But you don't want that guy to go to free agency, especially after you traded all your shortstops on the roster for Lindor. So Steve Cohen knew that. The same thing goes for Vladimir Guerrero Jr. Vlad made it known to the Blue Jays, I want $400+ million. And then the Blue Jays came with 12 for $360. Now, it's only $40 million shy, or it might be more that he wants, over $400 million. But the fact is, they know. The Mets know what Vladimir Guerrero wants. You think Steve Cohen's going to trade for Vladimir Guerrero Jr. without having a little bit of awareness and a little bit of knowing that Vladimir Guerrero would sign an extension? Again, he's willing to sign an extension with the Blue Jays if they get to his price. Remember that. That's what he said. So there's no reason why, to me, if he gets traded to the Mets, that he wouldn't sign an extension with the Mets. And oh, by the way, he just got traded to the Mets where his best friend in Juan Soto is. Right? That's also a big deal in this whole scenario as well. So we have to understand the dynamic here. Well, that's the other thing, right? I forgot. Shoot, who the hell said it? I just lost the comment. Sorry, guys. Hold on 1 second. There we go. Stan. He goes, Jays get players prospects now after 2025. They get nada. And they would love to keep Vladdy away from the Bronx. Of course. And that's the other thing, too. You really, they could wait until the deadline and make a trade. Absolutely. But they are taking a big risk that somebody's going to need a first baseman that are involved or that are contenders at the deadline. So we know the Blue Jays aren't going to trade him to the Yankees. If Goldschmidt craps out and they need a first baseman, they're not trading them to the Yankees, right? So, well, Stan, you can't know that there's going to be a long-term extension, but you kind of have an idea. Like, all right, we already know Vlad's willing to sign an extension. He's willing to do it with the Blue Jays. There's no reason why, if the situation calls for it, and it's a team that he might be interested in getting traded to, and say, oh, no, I don't mind staying here. We know he is best friends with Juan Soto. That is something that are not talking about enough. That is a big deal. They were just partying the other day. There was a video of them hanging out. Like, there is a lot to talk about with that. That is more, not just, talk. That is actual facts. That's a big deal. So, again, do I think the trade might happen? I'm not going to say yes or no, but it's more on the table as longer and longer as this Pete Alonso situation, plays out and still takes longer. The Mets have to make a decision here, right? The Mets can't wait for Pete Alonso to make a decision. This is not helping our cause here. We're already January 6th here. We're a month away from pitchers and catchers. I know a month seems like a long way off, but 2 weeks from now, if these guys are still free agents and Vlad's still on the Blue Jays, it's getting closer and closer to crunch time here. So they got to start doing something here. They got to pivot or sign Alonso or whatever they want to do. They got to start doing it now. It's getting to the point now where it's like, come on, guys, let's go. Come on, let's get it done. Let's get some news here. Just want to see if there was any news while I was talking to you guys. Let's see. Just checking out really quick. Just checking. All right. So there ain't nothing else except for. So since we have been talking about Alonso, Vladimir Guerrero Jr., and Bregman, when I first started the stream, I talked about Michael Lorenzen going to the Royals. Gavin Lux got traded from the Dodgers to the Reds. And the dispute with the owner situation with the Padres between family members, and they're suing each other for control over the franchise. They're in, crazy. It's craziness over there now. And you do wonder if they're just going to start shedding payroll here like crazy and start trading off guys, like a Dylan Cease, like Luis Ariz, and on we go. That's something you have to look out for as well. So, well, BG, what is it with the big market though? Like Bregman has been in the biggest spots, probably more than a lot of people were talking about in regards to playoff baseball. He's been extremely clutch throughout his career. He's hitting the big moments in the playoffs over and over again, not just the cheating year. Throughout his career, he's been one of the best clutch hitters in the postseason. So I'm not worried about that. And again, when you get Juan Soto, when you got Francisco Lindor, the burden is not going to be on these guys. Like that's the other thing as well. That's why I have no problem with the Mets signing Pete Alonso, because Pete Alonso is not going to be the focus anymore, right? It's Juan Soto, it's Francisco Lindor. Those guys are going to be the main attraction. Those guys are going to be, talked about more often than not. Pete Alonso is just going to be part of the team at this point now. That's why I'd be okay with that. But Alex Bregman's going to be fine. I have no concern about him going to New York at all. At all. D, you don't have to deal Sprout. That's the thing where people are missing here, right? You got to understand what they actually need. And you got to remember, the Toronto Blue Jays have a ton of pitching they spent a lot of money on that they have years of service still. They signed a ton of pitchers for over the next 2, 3, 4 years. They're still locked up in contracts. So what they need more is position players. If you're going to trade Vladimir Guerrero Jr., right? If Bo Bichette on his last year of his deal, right? They don't have a lot of position players, or at least young ones, right? They got to get younger position player prospects. And if you go look at my video, I break down the trade proposal for the New York Mets, and it is 2 prominent position player prospects that I'm sending over, along with 1 pitching prospect and along with a starting pitcher that's already on the Mets roster. So if you check that video out, you'll see why it might seem like an overpay, but I think it's a solid, fair deal where the Mets would be willing to give up those players, where it's not going to completely kill their farm system, which it won't, because you still keep Sproat and you keep others in your top 10 as well. But I'm giving 3 of my top 10 prospects along with a journeyman starting pitcher that I think they can use in the back end of the rotation, or possibly a long man in their bullpen. That is the idea here. Yeah, exactly. And Jason said already, a 3 prospect would get it done. Yeah, exactly, it would. 100%. And that was what I went through when I was doing this proposal. Again, I didn't make this proposal up just for kicks and giggles here. I try to break it down. What do the farm system is not very good for the Blue Jays, right? They tried it with their young guys, with Bichette and Biggio and Guerrero. It hasn't worked. Biggio's gone. Bo Bichette's probably on his way out, and Vlad's probably going to be on his way out, right? So they need a hell of a lot of position player prospects. That's what they need. That is what they need. So that's a fact. And looking at their farm system, it's not very good. They got a couple of pitching prospects. They don't have that many, if at all, top position player prospects. So what do? You use your position player prospects that you have a good amount of, and you use it as assets to give. And this is why you got to entice the Blue Jays to trade Vladimir Guerrero now. And I think it's a fair deal. Well, then anyone but Mauricio and Acuna isn't trash. That's the problem, that you might see that. Mauricio played a month, and everybody's, making him a star. Same thing with Acuna. And again, by the way, I didn't put those in the trade. So if you're gonna look at the video, and I break it down extremely well, and I tell you why I put those guys in there. And that's where the Mets have to explore that type of trade. Brad, he'll be 26 next year. He was 25 last year. He's going to be 26. So he's Juan Soto's age, basically. You get in the 26th year with Vladimir Guerrero Jr. It's similar to Juan Soto. And again, if the Blue Jays aren't completely willing to trade him this offseason and thinking about trading him at the deadline, that's why you give the proposal that I give, where it's a very competitive, fair deal, where, yeah, you might not want to give up 1 or 2 of these prospects, but you do it for Vladimir Guerrero Jr., who's been proven. And again, one of the guys have been a potential possibility at first base in our farm system. The other one is one of the known middle infielders that we have a ton of, and one is the pitching prospect, along with a starting pitcher that I also put in there that can be in the back end of the rotation or the bullpen as well. I'm trying to catch up with the comments, guys. Just give me a second. Let's see. Well, Fire Blazing, I think the Mets were considered Clifford as a potential first base option. He played some first base in the minor leagues. He's a corner outfielder, but he's played a lot more first base. He played a little with the Astros, and he played a lot more in the minor league system with the Mets since they acquired him. So they have been looking at that, and that's the other thing too, right? You can give them a guy like Ryan Clifford, who could potentially be the first base of their future in a potential trade package for Vladimir Guerrero Jr. So you're given what they need and what you think they might need going forward, just based on their prospects and what they might need position player wise going forward. So it is going to be very interesting to see. But again, there's still a lot of question marks when it comes to, the Pete Alonso situation. But honestly, the Mets have to just either sign him or get over it and move on. Because it's getting to the point now where you cannot have these guys come off the board in Bregman, Santander, and now you have to rush or you have to pivot, and now you're in panic mode because there ain't that much out there. And now the team, like a Vladimir Guerrero Jr., where the Mets might have to pivot to Vlad because they're in panic mode because Bregman's off the board, Santander's off the board, and Pete Alonso's still waiting out there. And now the Mets don't have much left to go for. And now they got to go to try to get Vladimir Guerrero Jr. And now the Blue Jays know you're desperate to get Vladimir Guerrero Jr. because there ain't much out there. And now you might have to pay even more. That's what you have to avoid. So I truly think that at the end of the day, the Vladimir Guerrero, I think, situation is going to start picking up steam. Because if the Blue Jays are going to offer him another contract offer, which I don't think they will until Santander or Bregman sign elsewhere. I'm going to tell you this right now, if they sign Anthony Santander or Alex Bregman, the Blue Jays, I don't think they're going to sign Vladimir Guerrero Jr. They might try to, but I don't think he's going to. And that is the issue that I think the Blue Jays are going to fall into. Yeah, Jason, you can keep our prospects, but the Mets still have a ton of prospects. Like you can't keep on holding on to these guys. This has been the detriment of this organization for years. They continue to hold on to their prospects, not go after it at the deadline, and every time when they had an opportunity to do something at the deadline to make their team better, they have not done it. I've gone over the years. I've been frustrated about it. I have been talking about it. At some point, they're going to have to do it in the offseason or the deadline. Stop being prospect huggers. It's getting to the point where you got to win at some point. You don't spend $765 million to win 10 years from now, even 6 years from now, 5 years from now. You got Lindor and Nimmo in their prime for the next 3 to 4 years. You got to win within that time. And if you do sign Pete Alonso, you got a 3 to 4 year window with your core to win with those guys. After that, now Juan Soto is going to be taking over the reign at 29, 30 years old. And you hope Vientos becomes a Lindor type or a Nimmo type. Take that next step, and Alvarez. Because if you don't, now you're in baseball oblivion, and now you got to figure it out all over again. The Mets they built their farm system quicker than anybody else could because of what they did with Scherzer and Verlander. They built their farm system within 6 months based on those trades. You built up the farm system. You got a top 10 to top 12 farm system. You have too many middle infielders that all can't play at the major league level on your team. Choose one that could play second base. If that's Mauricio, if that's Acuna, if that's Jet Williams, make that guy untouchable. The others are assets. You got to start using them. You can't be wasting them away in the minor leagues because that's how you hurt your value. Because then you might try to bring them up late in the year, and if they don't do the job, you're going to end up like Brett Beatty, who's lost basically any type of, look at him and top prospect potential for Brett Beatty. You have to make a decision. More often than not, the prospects don't pan out. And even if the Mets trade for Vladimir Guerrero Jr., and let's say it's Jet Williams or Ryan Clifford, and they become very good players, they're in Toronto, for crying out loud. They're in the American League. Who cares? What does that have to do with the New York Mets? Absolutely nothing. Because if the guy you got produces and helps you win, it doesn't matter. It does not matter. Ryan Clifford and Jet Williams can be beating up the Yankees in the next 5 years. I don't care. If they end up being very good players, when they become a free agent, the Mets can sign them if you really want them. At some point, you got to get a proven player in here when you need them, right? How many more young players do you need? Right? Nimmo, homegrown. Vientos, homegrown. Alvarez, homegrown. How many more do you need until you're satisfied? Do you want to win, or do you just want to have homegrown talent to just be enough to have a couple of fun seasons but not actually win? Right? I always laugh at the situation when Mets fans are like, oh, why don't you want Pete Alonso? He can be the home run record for the Mets. Who cares? Why does that accolade matter to Mets fans? The record isn't that sexy anyway. The Mets hasn't had great numbers career-wise for players. Like, if you care about the more individual stats for players and that's why you want a player, then you really don't want to win. So when Met fans complain and bitch and moan, I was like, well, you wanted to care about Pete Alonso's 500 home runs as a New York Met when that absolutely means nothing. We're celebrating David Wright because he ended up being a career Met, but that contract that the Wilpons gave him ended up being a disaster. And it was the end of the Mets spending money as the Wilpons when they owned the team, once they gave David Wright that contract. Right? David Wright's a great Met because the Mets overall franchise hasn't had a lot of great players, and they haven't been here long enough to have great numbers with the New York Mets. We're celebrating David Wright for his individual accolades as a New York Met. Didn't win a championship. Now, everything is not him, but we all forget he was a part and one of the biggest faces of this franchise when the Mets collapsed in 07 and collapsed in 08. Right? We all forget about that. Like he wasn't part of the team. Like we exclude David Wright from that when he was a big part of the team. The same way the Met fans do with Pete Alonso. Like, they don't blame him for nothing. Any failure the New York Mets have, it's not Pete Alonso's fault. Well, why? You give him all the credit when he does well and when he gets all these numbers. Come on, guys. Like, are we trying to win? The point is the New York Mets to win a championship, not Pete Alonso's 500th home run, not Lindor trying to get a Gold Glove, not Brandon Nimmo to do whatever. Who cares about the individual awards? I want my New York Mets to win a World Series. You do whatever you can to get that. Too many times, the Mets haven't done enough in the offseason. Then everybody's like, oh, well, you have the deadline. Then they don't do enough in the deadline. And then when you make the playoffs and you don't get far enough and you don't win, and the main reason, and I've talked about this, especially last year, David Stearns didn't want to give up any prospects. So you couldn't get a guy like Luis Castillo. You couldn't get a guy like Blake Snell or another top-line pitcher that the New York Mets needed. And then what happened? What hurt us the most in the playoffs? The pitching. The one time the Mets did it in 2015, they traded their top prospect for Yoenis Cespedes. Mets fans were so shocked because they never done it. And Yoenis Cespedes wasn't enough. Right? That was the one time they actually did go for it. Find me another year they did. In the offseason or at the deadline. They always half-ass it. And then when they don't do enough in the offseason, all I hear is people saying, well, they got the deadline to do it. They got the deadline to do it. Why does there have to be question marks to start the season? There shouldn't be. Now, I'm not saying that, all right, maybe a bullpen isn't as great. Okay, bullpens, there's going to be a lot of arms available at the deadline, like always. The hardest things to get is a big bat and a top-line starter. So the Mets can be possibly going into that needing a top-line starter going into the deadline, or whatever they might need that's not bullpen help, you're going to say, oh, they can get it at the deadline? You sure about that? Because the Mets never do it. And it's been constant. Yeah, and that's the other thing, right? In 2015, the Mets went out against Cespedes. Great. Everybody wanted the bat. We got the bat. That was the biggest concern. We got to the World Series. We lost in 5. What did the Mets do? Instead of making the team better around Cespedes, they say, you know what? We'll sign Cespedes, but that's it. They didn't do nothing else. When we all knew the 2015 team wasn't a very good roster. They had the pitching, but their lineup was terrible. Let's be honest about that. We had a broken down David Wright. Yoenis Cespedes was coming back. All right, everybody wanted him signed. But who else was there in the lineup? Wasn't much. The lineup wasn't very good. It never was. Yoenis Cespedes put them on their backs. And the Mets did nothing else. Signed Yoenis Cespedes, made the fans happy. And we went into 2016 where the biggest issues was the lineup again. We ended up making the wild card, losing to the Giants. And then it was, oh, well, that went the end of that. 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. We got to stop doing that crap. Like at some point, we got to game 6 of the NLCS. You need to be at that point or better, or it's a freaking failure. It's just that simple. Yeah, Richard, but you know who was spent the pitching? Maybe if you would have got a guy that can give you innings, or a guy that is a good pitcher that is not, breaking down because he pitched 180 innings, that could have been a difference. And that's the problem. That is the issue. And I'm sick and tired of people like, well, you know what, guys? Guess what? Well, Duran, it wasn't the turning point when Cespedes fielded that home run error. It wasn't. Because the Mets went into the 9th inning with a lead. Juris Familia blew the game 1. So that was the turning point. The Mets had a lead going into the 9th inning in game 1. They blew it. Familia blew it. No, the lineup was not good. The 06 team and even the 2022 lineup was better than the 2015 lineup. I'm sorry, but I'm sick and tired of people like, oh, you can't get rid of our prospects. You can't get rid of our prospects. Please. Yes, you can. Right? I see everybody else do it. Teams that made a play. You see the Rangers, right? They traded for Scherzer. I know it didn't work out playoff-wise. He didn't pitch good. I think he pitched a little bit, but didn't pitch well at all. But they still went for it. They got extra start in pitching and traded prospects because of it. Same thing with the Astros. They thought Verlander could have been a difference maker in the second half of the season, and they gave us Gilbert and Clifford. The Dodgers, every time they need somebody, they get somebody. They trade their prospects. When you got a good team and you're going through the year and you have a chance to better your team, you do it, because that move might get you to the promised land. And isn't the point winning the World Series, or do you just want to talk about Grimace and OMG and how cute the season was last year? Like, I don't want to talk about Grimace and OMG. This team got to Game 6 of the NLCS. There's no reason why you couldn't make it better. Sorry, it might piss a lot of people off, but it's a fact. There's too many times in this team's history, just go over the last 20 years, right? Go after the Mets got traded for Mike Hampton. They got Mike Hampton. We got to the World Series. We didn't re-sign Mike Hampton. He went to Colorado. The Mets didn't want to give him more similar money in years than Colorado did. He went to Colorado. You know what the Mets did to replace Mike Hampton? Kevin Napier. That was their move. So you got to a World Series and you just got worse because you didn't want to give Mike Hampton more years and more money. Like, come on. Like, stop it. Like, the last 20 years, the amount of times they have not done enough in the offseason, and then everybody's like, well, there's a deadline. Yeah, but it's much harder to get guys at the deadline now because there's more teams in it than ever. The Mets at the deadline, what were they, like 7 games out of a wild card spot? You know how many teams were still thinking that they were in it and didn't make trades? So there's less teams that are willing to trade, which means there's more competition for the same players. You can't be that confident going into a deadline thinking that you can get wherever you might need. But the offseason is the time to do that. So, unfortunately, until the Mets actually do it, until David Stearns actually trades prospects, I'm not going to believe it until I see it. And at some point, you got to do it. Now, I kind of understand why David Stearns didn't trade prospects at the deadline last year to make the team better for basically a starting pitcher, because it was his first year running the team. He's still evaluating the prospects. Understandable. Nobody knew at that point that they can go on the run that they did. Fine. But now's the time. I was told by Steve Cohen and David Stearns, 2025 and beyond is the years to go for it. So you do it. But I haven't seen any evidence yet that David Stearns is willing to trade prospects to get better. And that if that goes for Luis Castillo traded for him, or Dylan Cease traded for him, or Vladimir Guerrero traded for him. Until they trade prospects, I'm not going to believe that that's serious of going for it. I'm sorry. I'm just not. So, Roki Sasaki decision should be soon. Over the next, the 15th is when he can officially, he can sign now, but he's waiting for people to get their international bonus money in order. And in the 15th, it kind of resets and everybody can do what they need to do with that money. So that's when everybody believes he's going to sign between the 15th and the 23rd of January. We'll see. Again, I still don't believe the Mets are the favorites. It seems like he's actually, with Joe Wolf, his agent, talking about Jeremy Hefner at the winter meetings was interesting. That's something they usually don't see. Maybe the Mets have more of a chance than we all think. We'll see. We have no control over that, except everybody had the same amount of time in the meetings, and you just hope for the best. We can't do anything with that. So that sucks. We just have to wait and see. There ain't that much to talk about with Roki Sasaki until he actually signs elsewhere. The last topic of the day, guys, bench options, right? We know about Iglesias. We know about Winker. Is Jurickson Profar a possibility? Me and Chris talked about that on the other hot stove. He is a possibility because the Mets did go after Teoscar Hernandez and offer him a 2-year deal. Jurickson Profar fits that profile where the Mets are looking. Versatile player, can play all 3 outfield positions, can play a little infield as well. He's a major utility guy. He can play many positions on the field. David Stearns likes guys that can play multiple positions on a field and play them well. And he can hit you 20 home runs. He's a solid bat. That is an option as well. I think at the end of the day, I think it might be Iglesias and Profar as a possibility. But bench-wise, I think Iglesias is coming back. I don't know if Winker is going to come back. That's a little annoying, but again, we can get a starting job elsewhere. And, would he come back for less money to come back to the Mets? I mean, then the Mets would do it, but I think he can get more money and a starting role elsewhere. And if you're a baseball player, what do you want to do? You want to start. So that might be the issue there. Iglesias, I think he knows what he is. He's probably a bench piece. He could probably start on a bad team, but I don't think he wants to go to a bad team. He can be a bench player for the Mets. He can play multiple positions. We know what he can do. We saw him all year. So we'll see with that. Bullpen options, I still think, again, we talk about the bullpen like the Mets bullpen is starting from basically zero. They're not. You got Buto. You got Nunez. You got Reed Garrett. You got Diaz. That is already 4 guys in the bullpen that I think a lot of us can say, all right, not bad so far. Now, you probably need one more right-handed pitcher, definitely a left-hander, and a pitcher that is a Swiss Army knife. Somebody that can come in early in the game if the starting pitcher doesn't have it, a long man type. So if you get Stanek and let's say A.J. Minter or another left-hander that's a solid lefty, and then a long man, now you're working with some magic here. I think that bullpen would be pretty good. But you're already working with Buto, Nunez, Garrett, and Diaz. That is a good start. Now, until Sasaki signs, and at least 1 or 2 of these top free agents in Bregman, Santander, and Alonso, until 2 of those sign, the bullpen market's going to be slow. So we'll see. Hopefully it comes to, Finnegan, Robinson, Yates, those guys as well. I still like to have a lefty in the bullpen. I think that's really important, but we shall see. So, guys, Alonso return. Is it starting to look a little bit more slimmer as the days go by and the Mets might pivot? Yet to be determined. Is Vladimir Guerrero a possible target for the New York Mets and on the table? I think it's starting to become a little bit more of a possibility just because the Mets can't continue to wait. They cannot do that. Is Bregman an option? I still think Bregman's going to be a New York Met. I just feel it. I just feel like he's going to be a New York Met. I don't think the Tigers are as serious as everybody is talking about. If they were that serious and quote-unquote all in, you'd think they would have done it already. So I don't think they're hitting that the amount of money, and I don't think they're hitting the amount of years that Bregman wants. Santander, I think, is either going to be in Toronto or somewhere else. I don't know where. I don't think he's going to be a New York Met at this point, but we'll see. Roki Sasaki should be making his decision between the 15th and the 23rd, so that's about a week and a half away. And then we'll have an understanding of where he goes. Then the Mets can pivot if they're going to pivot to a trade possibility, maybe a Dylan Cease, maybe a Luis Castillo, maybe another pitcher we're not even thinking of. We shall see. Bench pieces, Winker, Profar, Iglesias. I think it's the three guys to watch out for. I think they'll get two of them. I think Iglesias is probably the obvious one, and it's going to be between Winker and Profar. I know Met fans are going to want Winker, but the Mets might profile Profar as a better suitor for the Mets because he can play multiple outfield positions. He can hit 20 home runs. Again, I like Winker. I'd like to bring him in back and Iglesias back. But again, you can't just go based on the OMG and all this other stuff. I think Winker brings that attitude that I think the Mets need. And Iglesias just calms the waters down in the dugout, in my opinion. I think that's crucial for this team. And we'll have to see. So, guys, episode 23 of Mets Hot Stove is in the books. It's been a nice hour plus of a show. Hopefully, over the next week and a half, we get actually talk about some damn signings here. Most likely we'll be doing a show, if not tomorrow, definitely on Wednesday. If there's anything breaking, I will come live as long as I'm not sleeping or at work. Do my best to bring that breaking news to you guys. With that said, guys, thank you for tuning in to episode 23 of the Mets Hot Stove. Subscribe to my channel. Subscribe to Chris' channel, guys. Hit that like button, and I'll see you next time on the Mets Hot Stove show. Have a great night, guys. As always, Met fans, let's go Mets. Have a good night, and we'll see you next time, guys. Good night.
Dead of night, full of echo. Concrete jungle, dreams bust to grow. Mets in the air, chase glory, no fear. Broken backs, but hearts steer clear. OMG, the chaos, what a scene. Streets buzzing like a machine. Creamers from the